Hi, everyone. We're here with Zach Everson, who is our staff writer, of course, tracking money, politics, Trump, all things in Washington. Do check out the Checks and Imbalances newsletter. And Zach, always good to see you. What's on your radar this week?
Thanks, Diane. Good to see you too. The big story was continues to be Herschel Walker, and obviously most people, if you're watching this, you know the news about the report in the Daily Beast that he had encouraged and paid for his girlfriend to have an abortion. And after that news broke, I reached out to some of the pro-life groups that have been backing him. There's a super PAC that is affiliated with the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, better known under its last name as the Susan B. Anthony list. And they said, yes, we're continuing. He's denied the reports. We're continuing to support him. And they weren't lying. They were true. I checked the data, and within the 4 days after the news broke about Walker, they were in for about $165,000 supporting Mr. Walker. They don't donate directly to his campaign. They're a super PAC. So they were buying ads on his behalf, either supporting him or opposing Raphael Warnock. And the money was split. $125,000 went towards digital ads, and the balance was for people to go door to door.
And what does this tell you? In essence, it's, it's less about the personality and morals of the candidate than it is what they will do when they get into office, or if they get into office?
Absolutely. We've been talking over several of these chats about what qualifies as a scandal now. And he hasn't really lost any support. I even reached out to the campaign and said, can you give me any examples of pro-life groups that have turned on candidate Walker? And they, of course, they probably wouldn't have pointed out any if they knew any, but I couldn't find any. And they gave me the references to like 5 or 6 that are standing by him. So it's the vote. You don't have to be consistent anymore. You don't have to live by the principles that you're campaigning on. They feel confident that if Herschel Walker is elected in the Senate, he will be a vote to end abortion. And they know Raphael Warnock is strongly pro-choice. So it doesn't matter how many abortions Herschel Walker may have funded.
Let's unpack the PACs a little bit, because we have PACs, we have super PACs. Let's just start with that and remind viewers as to what the difference is and how important a role they play in these elections.
They play a huge role. Mostly, I would probably say super PACs a little bit more. So the regular PAC can contribute directly to a campaign.
So a political action committee.
You can go ahead, but it's capped at $5,000 to each candidate. And companies can also donate to the campaign. So if we go back to that Walker example, I believe the pro-life group, its PAC, donated $5,000 to Walker's campaign. And that was the extent of what it can do. Whereas the super PAC is not allowed to contribute directly to the campaign, but it can spend untold amount of money on advertisements on that candidate's behalf. Now, the rule is they're not supposed to coordinate, but it's hard to prove whether there is any sort of coordination. And I mean, most of the time, these super PACs are run by a former staffer of the congressman or senator. So you refer to them as affiliated with or associated with, which is different usually. And then the congressperson will also have their regular leadership PAC. So a congressperson could have typically 4 or 5 fundraising vehicles. They'd have their regular campaign. They'd have a joint fundraising committee, which is if they were doing a fundraiser with another candidate, say Herschel Walker and Blake Masters are getting together, they would form a joint fundraising committee to split the proceeds of that. You'll often find those are called victory funds. Then you'll find the leadership PAC, which is the one that a regular PAC that can take the $5,000 contribution. And then you'll find the super PAC, which is not directly associated with that person's name, but it's just affiliated. Or the words that the Susan B. Anthony group called it was, they referred to it as their partner PAC.
Well, and these partner PACs, are they more prominent in the midterms are never necessarily, the most crucial, but in this particular moment, we're seeing a lot of money flowing into these super PACs right now. Are they being directed in particular areas, you find?
The spending keeps going up. I haven't looked at it, but I would guarantee that the spending in this midterm race is higher than what it was in the last midterm race. The money largely is spent in the Senate races in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, and in Georgia. maybe a little bit in Ohio as well, but not. It doesn't seem to be as on big donors and super PACs radar as much. But it's largely going for the Senate.
And the other term that's being thrown around a lot is dark money. We're talking a lot about dark money. Explain exactly what we mean by that.
Sure. Nonprofits are able to donate to political campaigns with a whole bunch of rules on this, but they can do it as long as they don't qualify themselves as a political entity. But politics accounts for, less than half of what they do. So they can then donate money that way and not have to disclose. You don't know who donated that money to the nonprofit. So
there's the cloak of anonymity allows you to then act basically with impunity. Well, one of the stories that you have out is about a Texas congressman's campaign that violated finance laws. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So the FEC did an audit of Representative Randy Weber. I guess they found some stuff that was interesting in his reporting for the last cycle. So for the 2020 cycle, I believe. And they were going through, and they found that he had received excess contributions, which happens sometimes, but you're supposed to promptly refund those. That didn't happen. That the amount of cash he reported was incorrect by tens of thousands of dollars. And that also he failed to file notices about contributions made in the last 20 days of an election. If you get a big donation, then you're supposed to report it within 48 hours, and he didn't do that. So they found all of those issues, which it's not major that it's going to automatically trigger an investigation. The FEC could investigate, the House Ethics Panel could investigate, or the Office of Congressional Ethics could investigate. And the amount just didn't seem like it would automatically be of interest to them. But it's big enough that it might be. You wouldn't be totally surprised. So I reached out to the congressman and asked what happened. And they had cooperated throughout with the audit. They were offered the opportunity to have a hearing. They turned that down, but they did adjust and correct their filings. So when I reached out to the congressperson, he said the issue was his compliance firm and that they hadn't opened a whole bunch of letters from the FEC that had requested additional information, nor they reconciled his account. So, I wrote that down. I went to go fact check that and see, okay, who is his compliance firm? Who is getting these letters? And the first email address on his statement of organization was his wife, Brenda, retired school teacher. So his
wife, Brenda, is his compliance officer?
That was the first. Well, she was the contact person. So I reached out to the FEC and just said, hey, they couldn't tell me about the specifics, whether in that instance they could confirm that the letters went to Brenda Weber. But they were able to say, yes, when we have letters like this to send out, we send them on email. We send them via email to the email addresses on record. So I went back out to the congressperson and said, okay, this sounds like they went to your wife. What happened? And he just said, well, she forwarded them to the compliance department without opening them.
This is the kind of thing, not whether that's true or not, that really does erode trust in politics. It erodes trust in the system. And certainly when we hear about the dollar figures being spent on super PACs. I mean, one of the questions with regard to the election coming up, I know certainly you've covered President Trump extensively in the past, but what are you seeing regarding anything to do with polls around trust, around engagement in this election? Because we certainly are still in a very polarized environment. But I'm curious, sort of when you get stories like this, just to get some read on how Americans are feeling about this circus.
It's a lot like sports. I grew up outside of Boston. Not really a football fan anymore, but certainly was a Patriots fan when I was younger. And Tom Brady could do no wrong when I was a Patriots fan. And objectively, Tom Brady did some things wrong. So did Bill Belichick. They both made things wrong, but they're your guy, so you back them. And that's what it is here. And that's happening right now with Walker. I was reading a reporter from Insider is on the grounds right now at a Walker rally, and she's asking people holding pro-life signs, what's your thought process? And they're like, well, he's the pro-life vote. We're fine. He's their guy. And that's it.
Is it reminiscent of Donald Trump to you?
Pardon?
Is it reminiscent of the reactions to Donald Trump?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Trump famously said he could shoot somebody in Fifth Avenue and get away with it. And, the scary thing isn't that he said it. The scary thing is that he's right.
Well, and at this point, their odds are high that at least, Attorney General Merrick Garland, et cetera, that there is going to be some day of reckoning for President Trump. Do you think, because you are somebody I think of on the ground covering this day in, day out, what's your take on that? What are you hearing?
As I stammer along, I don't see anything going to happen. You're seeing a lot of progressives are furious at Garland for not having done this already. They wanted the perp walk down Pennsylvania Avenue on day one. And he's taking his time. And I don't know if anything is going to happen, to be honest. I mean, Trump is up there in years. He's expert at playing the legal system. He's well funded. He's using his super PAC money to pay for his legal bills. So he's got a lot of money to take care of that stuff. And if they could ever find a jury, if they could ever seat a jury where 13 people would be willing to convict Donald Trump of anything, I'm surprised. I think the day of reckoning that I think would come, if it's possible for Donald Trump, it's going to be in a history book. And it's going to be something that like my grandkids will be reading about, where they see all these things and they see how he largely was able to pull it off. And I think it'll be a day of reckoning for the Americans who are alive in a voting age right now as well.
Great. Zach Everson, thanks very much.
My pleasure.